The ego is the system that runs your sense of self. It is made out of thought patterns, emotions, and behavioral loops, and the stories that try to hold it all together. Left unchecked, it creates endless existential searching, chronic disconnection, and the persistent sense that something is wrong. The goal of my videos is clarity, to see your identity and its contradictions for what they are, named precisely, to finally understand what it is that we're all running away from. Through the process of psychological wholeness and self-understanding, intellectuals always have their intellect as the main roadblock towards a deeper and more fulfilling life. Because the intellect is used to block off any emotional or heartfelt vulnerability with reality or other people in your life. The intellect wants to defend its own territory by using its own frameworks, its own belief systems, and its own understanding of language, and weaponizes it against other opinions and the ability for your own ego to change. So the intellect is one of the main roadblocks to overcome and to see through in order for you to go deeper into this process. And people hate this, especially those who are interested in philosophy and science and rationality. They cannot believe that the logic that they have clinged so hard to actually has to be broken down. It needs to be deconstructed as also just another assumption about how the world functions, instead of some ultimate theory of everything that ties it all together. Your brain processes things in an incredible speed, and most of it happens in the subconscious. And then the conscious mind is really the press release who drives the narrative about why you did something this way, thought something this way, or said something this way. In the same manner, if I tell you something and you dismiss what I say, the dismissal happens before you even can think about it. And then you use logic and your intellect to explain to yourself why you just dismissed an idea, why it's dumb or stupid. And this is what keeps people locked into their own reality models, because it is very difficult to then move out of this preemptive reaction. One needs to purposefully want to see through the intellect and notice how the rational mind feeds you explanations that are actually moving you away from the point that is being made. There are two parts of your nervous system that you can divide into head and heart, which can also be used as intellect and feeling. And when you are always in the intellect, you are using the intellect to block off the feeling part. When the feeling part, if we are going to be honest about what it means to be alive, is most of what aliveness actually is. It is feeling sensations, both emotionally, but also your physical environment. And the intellect removes you from this feeling aspect of your own body and puts you into your head. And then in your own head, you build stories and narratives and use your logic and intelligence to block yourself off further from the actual feeling parts of life. If you are studying, be it philosophy, science, psychology, it is very intuitive to lean more towards the head side of things, because this is how society rewards us. If you're going to be perceived as intelligent, if you are making a lot of money with your wisdom, if you are very hard and cold and can just plow through and do a ton of work without falling out of your rhythm. All of this is rewarded when you have an ego that is strong and rigid and doesn't let itself get dissolved by all of this airy-fairy emotional feeling stuff. The intellect is used to not experience pure consciousness. It is a blockade being constructed by the mind over years of social conditioning to not simply be present, but to always think about who am I, what is my purpose, where am I going to be in the future, what has happened to me in the past, what do other people think of me right now, and am I right or wrong about these assessments? The moment somebody contradicts one of your assessments about the nature of your future, about what is happening right now, like about politics or whatever it is, then you're going to feel attacked. But it's not just you who's going to feel attacked. It's the intellectual mind that feels attacked. And by piercing through the intellectual mind through an attack, you suddenly get emotional. Now you're feeling an emotion because the intellectual part got pierced through. And this we then call being or offended or emotionally hurt if you have the vulnerable vocabulary, or you're going to say this was disrespectful. Why did you disrespect me this way? And in this way, we express our own emotional vulnerability without being too direct about it and kind of still play in this realm of the intellectual mind. Because now we can talk rationally about what you did wrong and why you did this wrong and what you should have done and all of this neat stuff where the rational mind actually feels quite at home because it loves debating, it loves discussions, and it likes the conflict. The reason it likes the conflict is because it is made out of conflict. It is the part of the brain that constantly contrasts your opinion with other people's opinion, which tries to assert its own viewpoint and kind of assert dominance in this way instead of simply listening and receiving. The more you struggle to simply be present with a person and listen and receive whatever energy they are bringing to the table, be it emotional or fidgety or excited, the more you are actually closer to psychological wholeness. And most people that I talk to in this intellectual, spiritual, philosophical space are very much hyper-oriented towards rationality. And that's also why I was so interested in philosophy and science, because there's where you can find all of the rationalists that make sense and don't say stupid esoteric theories. And I think there's a general vibe shift happening right now, also in the philosophy community, where we are acknowledging now that experience and consciousness and feeling, for that matter, is kind of closer to the truth than our frameworks and theories. And it's because these frameworks and theories were always a sort of coping mechanism designed to not have to actually be in pure beingness. Because pure beingness strips your identity away. It strips your rationality away. Now you actually have to confront yourself with what life and existence is actually like, and not this distancing mechanism that the mind tries to do so you can keep yourself distant from your own life. We imagine through the intellect that we have some sort of control over our life, or control over politics, or control about other people view us. And through pure being and being able to shut up the mind that talks to us all the time, suddenly pure experience feels much more truthful. And the mind seems to be actually the thing that is causing all the problems. It is causing the sense that something is wrong all the time, and something needs fixing, and something needs to be disagreed with. When you strip away this layer of the mind and compare yourself to other animal species, it seems like this entire mind apparatus is kind of like a sickness. And the intellect convinces itself that the sickness is important and necessary, and not just that, but it is a sign of pride. I can see this all the time when I talk to people who have gone to university and studied psychology or studied science, and then you want to have a human conversation with them on an emotional layer, and you can see that a lot of people are simply not capable of having a conversation because they need to bring up constantly their own credentials, what they have learned, what they have studied, and cannot really move outside of this framework. And especially, they couldn't admit that their entire framework they're using is incomplete or maybe even wrong. Especially in academic circles, you are getting rewarded for being very sophisticated and building grand theories and putting a lot of effort and thought and convincing your teachers and your superiors that what you say has been well researched and is accurate. And as valuable as this entire system is, and as much as it has advanced science and psychology and so much about what we do also in government office, it still is very far removed from the actual painful experience of being human. And if you talk to somebody and he tells you that he feels depressed, and you start to go and bring up papers about studies of people who also have been depressed and about stuff that has helped them, as amazing as this is, the person in front of you is going to feel quite disconnected emotionally and personally from you, because it's like now you are just data to this person. You're not being engaged with as a human, but just as a reference point to bring up all the stuff that you know about a topic, instead of just feeling with them. And ironically enough, just hearing out their pain and really feeling with them in the moment might be more helpful. The trick is not to give up your intellect, but to challenge it the right way, to find out why my process moves you through the intellect towards pure being. Check the link in the description where I explain my entire protocol. A lot of what the intellect really wants is that it wants to be seen and understood. And a lot of the seeking for friendship and companionship is so that you can use all the rationality that you have built up in your brain that tries to justify your own existence or way of being, and for the other person to see this and say, okay, you are a good person and you are an intelligent person, and this is why I love you and care for you. And the moment there is a conflict in the relationship and there's an argument that suddenly starts, you're going to feel immensely disconnected, because now it's like, hey, they don't see me. They are not seeing how I think. They say my rationality is wrong. They say that my opinion is wrong too. And I feel like they're not feeling how I feel, and they're not even interested in how I feel. And then there's this typical disconnect between two couples where it seems like they are arguing, and both are arguing on this weird who is right and who is wrong intellectual level. But in actuality, it's not about that at all. And it was always about the vibe shift that has happened, where somebody now feels worse than before. And people are just shifting around the blame of why this vibe shift has happened and who is responsible for it. The real way to move through this is very counterintuitive for everybody, for both men and women, but especially for men because they tend to be the thinkers. And it's to move aside all of the rationale and be present with the person, and to feel what is actually making you be bothered about the situation, and then be vulnerable with the person. A head awakening is what happens when you suddenly notice that the intellectual mind is just fooling you all the time, and that your attachment to logic and reason, as valuable as it might be, is always being used to fulfill your own needs, to make you feel secure and being looked upon as intelligent, or being seen as valuable in society because you have something to give that is mental or whatever. And then to notice that all of this is a construct made up by the mind, trying to justify your own sense of existence and trying to make you feel loved and appreciated by other people. It becomes a pretty brutal gut punch at first, because now you feel like you're losing the only tool you had in order to move through the world. But if the intellect actually is lying most of the time for its own benefit and is playing this weird ego game, just trying to be perceived more intelligent, and not wanting to make itself vulnerable in front of other people, not to reveal the authentic self, what is the implication here? Have you lived all your life and all this time for an identity, like the identity of the intellectual or the smart person or the whatever, right? Is this entire identity really just there because you're insecure? And this is difficult to sit with. But if you can sit with it, you can kill the intellectual part that uses all of this energy to prop itself up in order to not be made to feel insecure. Meditation is an amazing tool to move yourself away from your own intellect, because meditation is an amazing way to move yourself away from your own intellect. If you have never meditated before, or you've just meditated sporadically, you probably know this feeling that meditation is kind of a waste of time. It feels very useless to do, because the entire mechanism that the intellect uses and defines as useful goes completely against what meditation is about. Meditation deactivates the part that wants to protect yourself from feeling and activates the feeling. And now there's no point to it. There's no grand theory to figure out. There's no framework with which to agree or disagree with. There's nothing to argue against. And what does the mind do then? Well, it will argue anyway. It will think about stuff and reflect constantly. If you haven't learned how to sit in silence and turn off your mind, your intellect is running the show. And it is this thinking that will keep you stuck in psychological dissatisfaction.